Chop, the original Guillotine League podcast. Everything you need to know to avoid the chopping block. Chop is brought to you by GuillotineLeagues.com. Now, your host, Paul Charchian.
Hello and welcome to Chop, the Guillotine League Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us after week number 1 in the books. We've learned a lot. We've answered a lot of questions. And here to help me break down some of what we saw and a lot of what we think is coming this weekend, I've got two co-hosts. My first is a man so committed to his modeling, he's become the majority shareholder in and is launching a hostile takeover of the Estes Model Rocket Company. That's Matthew Freedman. Hey, my man.
I don't even know what to say to that intro.
I know you had no idea that was coming, did you?
No, I did not know that was coming. But look, at least I'm not dressed like Thor, who's going to have to speed walk a 40-yard run. Look at that. Look at that new.
Here we go.
I'm James Pierce.
Hoodie. Yeah.
James Pierce.
It's amazing
I love it.
stuff right there.
I love it. My other co-host is Thor Nystrom, a man whose pants have been in geosynchronous orbit since Monday night. Thor, are you doing victory laps on JJ McCarthy at this point, or are you playing it cool, waiting for a few more data points?
Yeah, I've been comatose up until 5 minutes ago. You know, I got up to do this show, but yeah, the celebration in the wake of the Monday night performance has been absolutely incredible.
It's been a lot of fun. A lot of deleted tweets at halftime. A lot of deleted
tweets.
After halftime of that Viking game. In this segment last week, people love it. Viewers love nothing more than we eat our L's. In this segment last week, I said, let's just wait a game on JJ McCarthy. Let's just see how it plays out. And for a half, that looked like absolutely the right call. And then he ended up with a really nice fantasy game in that second half. He will not come up here. On Thursdays, our goal is to identify flex level players who could disappoint this weekend. Figuring out your flex is really critical. We're going to give you 9 players that you should reconsider. And guys, we struggled coming up with a name for this segment last week. We threw it out to all of our listeners and our viewers, and we got a doozy back. Do you want to unveil the new name of this segment, or do you want me to do it?
Go ahead, Charge.
Flex around and find out. It's so good. Rob Sullivan, thank you for that suggestion. Excellent. He's a longtime listener of the Chop podcast. That was nicely done. Flex around and find out. So now the question is, can I immediately shorten it to FAPO? Or is that going to be too weird? And that's going to confuse too many people.
Maybe we just go a couple weeks and then.
Couple of weeks?
I think
full flex around and find out. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that. Okay. Flex around and find out. Did you know this? Brought to you by Xfinity. Introducing the 5-year price guarantee. One consistent internet price for the next 5 years, guaranteed with Xfinity. Guys, I want to jump right into our 9 players that we are recommending you at least give some thought to, some extra thought to for your flex position. Now, you're going to start your sure thing players no matter what. I don't think, we don't want to sit here and tell you, well, Christian McCaffrey doesn't have his quarterback, so maybe you don't want to start him, blah, blah, blah. You're going to start him anyway. We're looking for flex guys you could reasonably bench for somebody else. And, normally I always start with Matthew. Freedman, you're immediately to my left on my camera. And so I tend to go to you first, but I feel like I should let Thor go first sometimes. So let's go to Thor first here. Thor, your first flex around and find out player is Dallas quarterback Dak Prescott against the Giants. Tell us about it.
Well, I'll get to that in a second, but in the spirit, Charchian, of we're gonna own our losses here. I better take one myself. And people are wondering, what do you got to? You're the McCarthy guy. I said in the last episode to keep Aaron Jones on the bench. And he had the 27-yard touchdown catch, which just changed the whole thing. But outside of that, 8 carries for 23 yards for Aaron Jones. Charging, you were banging the drum for Jordan Mason all offseason. Job well done. I mean, that's the way that this thing's going to play out. And outside of that one long touchdown catch for Aaron Jones, it was 2 catches for 14 yards or 16 yards or something like that. But the touchdown bailed him out. So that one's on me.
All right, we'll give you credit on that one. How do you feel about that touchdown pass to Aaron Jones? What do you think about that pass?
That was pretty nice. You know, the schematics that Kevin O'Connell was doing there, and in that one, you leaked Jones out of the backfield, and he got behind 2 defenders. And obviously, the throw ended up beating him there. But Jones, he's not going to get as many touches as just a pure running back this year. The carries, like we were talking about over the offseason, but they're going to use him in creative ways as a receiver. Obviously, he's going to take all the passing down work there for the Vikings backfield. So, yeah, that was a fun play.
Outstanding. All right, so let's talk about Dak Prescott. Actually, back-to-back episodes. We were, was it Freedman? Did you mention Dak Prescott as a flex or find out player last week? I think you did, and he came up with 188 yards and no touchdowns, right?
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned him, but to be honest, I can't remember who I wrote about on Monday, So last week, there's no chance that I'm pulling that out.
Okay. All right. So Thor, talk to me about Dak Prescott. Why are you nervous here about with the matchup with the Giants that on paper seems like it might be favorable?
Yeah, the matchup last week, and I think we all agreed with this, Dak Prescott looked awesome in that game against the Eagles. It's just it didn't manifest in the fantasy stats to the point that that you're setting up there, Charchian. 21 of 34 for 188 yards. Didn't have a touchdown, no interceptions either. Javonte Williams obviously had 2 touchdowns. You had some drops. Dak was mostly on, but you had a couple of misfires there. But Prescott ended up having the most lost yards due to drops in the NFL in week 1. That was estimated at 61 yards. But yeah, played really well. The Giants defense, on the other hand, the Giants were sort of flubbing around against the Commanders. So I would understand if people think that this is a must-start spot for Dak. The reason that I disagree with that is I think the Giants defense is going to play a lot better in this game than we saw in week 1. The game script got away from the Giants pretty quick in that one. And because of that, the front seven, the nasty front seven that the Giants have, it wasn't able to pin its ears back in the second half there against Jeudy and Daniels. Washington could kind of go to a more conservative type game plan to take that away. I think you're going to see that vaunted defensive front get after Dak Prescott a little bit more in this game. Dallas's offensive line in week 1 played better, I think we would all agree, than we thought they would. But we have to give the context that Jalen Carter was suspended before the first snap of that game. So and Dak Prescott said after the game, or I believe it was Dak Prescott, about how Dallas the entire week had designed all of their protection strategies around blocking Jalen Carter, and all of a sudden you didn't have to do that. Dallas's offensive line ends up looking a little bit better. I think New York Giants, that their front seven plays up. I think Dallas's offensive line plays a little bit down. And if I'm wrong and Dallas ends up flogging New York in this game, I think you're also going to see more running from Dallas as well. So I don't see the path to a huge fantasy game for Dak Prescott here that I think some others do. So I'm going to fade. One other thing I'll say is Dallas is giving the ball to their running backs inside the 5, inside the 10 again. I mentioned Javonte Williams is 2 touchdowns, so there could be some touchdown siphoning going on there too.
All right, fair points. Freedman, you're right there in Dallas. You cautiously optimistic on Dak, or you a little bit nervous, like Thor said?
Cautiously optimistic. Last week I think there were obviously negative circumstances going against a pretty strong Eagles defense. This week, I think, is different. I don't have nearly the same respect for the Giants defense, but I will say their pass rush can be pretty good. Like the strength of their defense is the defensive line. And
yeah,
we're not sold on the Cowboys offensive line. So there is the path to Dak, again, not having that great of a game. Like I thought he looked great throwing the ball.
Yeah.
Some of the guys didn't help him complete those passes, but
Yes.
he's not going to get goal line opportunities. So if he has a big game, it is strictly through the air. And there is the possibility that Giants defense, with that defensive line, the pressure they can bring, that they could give Dak and the Cowboys offense some problems. So I have him as my QB 12, but I can see the path to downside for sure.
He is my QB 14, so I've got him just a couple of spots lower. All right, Freedman, in the preseason, you and I battled in our agree to disagree segment maybe 3 weeks ago about DeAndre Swift. We've now got a data point on DeAndre Swift, and he goes up against Detroit. He is your flex around and find out player.
I have to say, in week 1, I feel like we were both kind of correct in the perspectives that we had in the preseason. It's a little bit of a Rorschach. My perspective in the preseason was there's no other running backs on the roster. And literally, he was the only running back to touch the ball for the team
right
last week. the only running back to get an opportunity. 17 carries, 5 targets. That is elite usage type of stuff.
Yeah,
at the same time, if you had the perspective in the preseason of, you know what, I don't think DeAndre Swift is that good. He didn't do anything in week 1 to dispel you of that notion. With all of the great usage he had, just 65 scrimmage yards and no touchdowns. Extreme inefficiency for the offense and for him. And that's the kind of thing that can lead to other guys getting opportunities. So I have a bold predictions article on the site. In one of my bold predictions this week is that the Lions will hold the Bears to 0 points. Now, the Lions, they allowed 27 points to the Packers in week 1. The Bears put up 24 points on Monday Night Football. So on the surface, it might not look as if the Bears are going to struggle to score, but they really struggled on offense, especially after their opening scripted plays were exhausted.
Yes.
So from the second quarter on, they were number 30 in offensive success rate.
Wow.
Now they're going on the road with a 1-day rest deficit to face a superior Lions team that knows new Bears head coach Ben Johnson better than any other team knows him based on his 6 previous seasons on the staff. And that Lions team is desperate to avoid back-to-back losses to open the season. And the Bears were dreadful running the ball last week. Dead last, number 32 in the league in rush success rate. Quarterback Caleb Williams, despite opening Monday Night Football with 10 straight completions.
Amazing.
That was amazing. That was amazing. And that sort of contextualizes what I'm about to say. Despite that, he finished number 27 in composite EPA and completion percentage over expectation. Just really, he was down there with Spencer Rattler, with Russell Wilson. If you're naming the 6 worst quarterbacks in the league, he's in that group based on what he did last week, despite completing his first 10 passes. That is absolutely unreal stuff. So I think the entire Bears offense is going to struggle, which means that Swift could be in line for another really subpar game, but this time with fewer yards and fewer opportunities. So I understand based on, it's almost impossible to say I'm benching a guy who last week was literally the only running back on his team to touch the ball and who got 17 carries and 5 targets. It's almost impossible to do that. But Swift, I think this week carries so much downside.
Among starters last week, DeAndre Swift, here's a couple of stats for you. Among starting running backs, he posted negative 1.2 yards over expectation. He finished 22nd in yards after contact, and he was 27th in broken tackle rate at just 5%. DeAndre Swift just isn't very good at football, unfortunately. Kyle Monangai got his way onto the field a couple of times, but didn't do much with it. All right, my flex around, first of 3, flex around and find out players. Nick Chubb going up against Tampa Bay. First, tip of the hat to Nick Chubb, who looked pretty good last week. He led all starting runners with a 39% avoided tackle rate. Great to see Nick Chubb look like old Nick Chubb. He finished 6th in rushing yards over expectation. And that is clearly, to me, a mandate for Houston to keep using Chubb. And I think you can drop all the other Texans running backs that you might be rostering as you were waiting to see how this thing would play out. From this point forward, it's all bad. The Houston offensive line, awful. They weren't good before last Sunday's game and lost starting center Jake Andrews to a high ankle sprain. He's expected to miss several weeks. And then starting right guard Ed Ingram, who was terrible to begin with, has got a back injury. I watched every Ed Ingram block as a Viking fan for 3 years, and I can assure you he is bad. Houston ranked 26th in ESPN's run block win rate. And honestly, I don't know how it was that high. To my eyes, they looked as bad as any team trying to block for their running backs. And then they go up against Tampa. Tampa was a great run defense last year. They finished 4th best in rushing yards allowed, 4th best in rushing touchdowns allowed. And this year in week 1, Tampa finished 3rd best in ESPN's run stuff win rate. They were 6th best in Pro Football Focus's run defense grade. And they just held Bijan Robinson, a far better runner to Nick Chubb, different stylistically, but better, to 2 yards per carry last week. So I am not very optimistic about this matchup. No opposing back has topped 78 rushing yards against the Bucs since week 9 of last year. And get this, going back to last year, 5 straight Bucs games in which no runner has topped 26 rushing yards, including Bijan Robinson last week. That is a brutal matchup for Nick Chubb. Flex around and find out. Anybody want to jump in, or just want to let that sit, because
that was pretty good, Church.
It was so eloquent.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, that's good. And I have to say, Vita Vea is, just an absolute force.
That was the only thing I was going to say.
Buccaneers defense.
Amazing.
Yeah. As long as he is healthy and out there, and it's the beginning of the season, he's healthy. As long as he is out there, any team is going to be challenged to run the football with efficiency. And then to your point, Charch, about the state of the Texans offensive line, it was bad last year. And then in the offseason, they traded away their left tackle, and it hasn't gotten better since then. And now they're injured. So I absolutely agree with you on this one.
All right, let's go to your next flex around and find out player. And it's Denver running back RJ Harvey going up against the Colts. I'm fascinated to see if you guys believe the Colts were simply in the right place at the right time to play Miami. A little bit like last year in week 1, the Saints put up 47 points on Carolina, which ended up having the worst defense in the league. Or if you think this Indy team is actually pretty good. Thor, RJ Harvey, what do you think?
Well, I'm still getting my head wrapped around that Ed Ingram is starting in the NFL still. That was
I know, right? Like, what? Who would do that? Why would some teams self-sabotage that way?
Yeah, a guy the Vikings would have released if that trade didn't come through with the Texans, but we digress. RJ Harvey, and folks out there that know my NFL draft work, you know that I love RJ Harvey. I was banging the table for him all spring long. And in the first, I faded him in week 1, too. He did end up getting to around 70 total yards, but I want to get into how he got there in week 1 in his NFL debut, and also why I'm pessimistic about him in this matchup, even though I love RJ Harvey as a player. So the first game, Sean Payton, who likes to screw with fantasy owners sometimes, he deployed a 3-man running back committee against the Titans. J.K. Dobbins played 53% of the snaps in that game, the running back snaps, and he had all 3 of the red zone touches, J.K. Dobbins did. Where that wasn't the frustrating part for R.J. Harvey owners. The frustrating part was Tyler Beatty, 25.6% route share.
Yes. What? Where did that come from?
You used a second-round pick on R.J. Harvey. Tyler Beatty's just a guy. He's just a guy. It's roster flotsam. And you're playing roster flotsam and targeting roster flotsam over your Alvin Kamara clone here in RJ Harvey. I was getting a little bit frustrated with that. But Harvey, he also had the identical route share, 25.6%. In terms of being on the field for those passing plays where technically he went out on a route. However, in the same amount of snaps, Beatty had 5 targets. RJ Harvey only had 1. And it was a security thing behind the line of scrimmage where he was also tackled behind the line of scrimmage. So 1 catch for -1 yards for RJ Harvey there. The rushing yards, RJ Harvey ended up with 60 on 6 carries. I watched all of his carries earlier today and the all 22 and whatnot. First carry of the game, it wasn't even designed to him. Bo Nix audibles at the line. They audible into a read option that Bo Nix ends up giving to RJ Harvey because the defensive end stayed home. So that was the first carry. He had 2 other carries in the first half, sort of nondescript. Where all of his fantasy value on Sunday came was in 1 carry, his second to last carry of the game, but his first carry of the fourth quarter, a 50-yard run, RJ Harvey. So 50 of the 60 yards came on that. And what happened was Broncos were in pistol. Bo Nix hands to Harvey. There's zone blocking ahead of him. And Harvey did a really good job of evading the first guy and then sort of jutting off his path to go to the other side of the line of scrimmage. He found a crease, accelerated through it, and then he made the one safety coming down miss. And then he was in the open field. But here's my whole thing. Even though RJ Harvey looked really good in that game when he was on the field, even though he had the explosive play, even though I love him as a player, I can't in good conscience have him in my fantasy lineups when I know the usage rate and the prerogative of Sean Payton. But and this is going back in history, the way he has used rookie skill players early in their first seasons. Alvin Kamara, that thing's been talked about quite a bit, so I won't go in depth on that. But Alvin Kamara's first month in the NFL with the Saints, he was not being used very much. It was a sort of a similar thing. Oh, let's get his feet wet. And let's get Alvin in for a couple snaps. Whatever. Every quarter or whatever. You just can't accrue the fantasy stats. So this sets up for RJ Harvey a scenario where you need to hit a long dinger in order to return fantasy value. for your owners, because the usage will not be there in this game unless Tyler Beatty disappears and then you get all the pass down work. But we can't project that in advance. I don't think that RJ Harvey will be given the workload here to do anything. So that's why, in order to return fantasy value. So I have to fade RJ Harvey this week. Later this season is when I want to play RJ Harvey, but it's not the time yet.
All right, Freedman, let's go to your second flex around and find out player. It's Cleveland wide receiver Jerry Jeudy. A mixed bag last week. 2 more drops for the league leader in drops last year, Jerry Jeudy. What do you think about this matchup, and what has you
Yeah, like DeAndre Swift, Jerry Jeudy was on the list of guys that I was interested in last year, or this offseason rather. But man, I'm not encouraged by what I saw in week 1. I tend to look at stuff from a sort of top-down betting perspective. So want to kind of contextualize some of this conversation through that lens. The Browns are on the road. They have a slate low implied team total of just 16.25 points. Divisional outdoor games tend to play to the under as well, especially early in the year in weeks 1 and 2. The under is 105 to 70 to 2. And those games have gone under by an average of 1.5 points. So we're already not expecting many points from the Browns. And then on top of that, their team total might still be too high. And then let's look at Kevin Stefanski. As a head coach, against the spread, he's about 500 outside of division, but inside of division. So against those really tough AFC North defenses, against teams that play him 2 times a year and start to have a familiarity of his offensive system, he is just 10 and 20 against the spread for his career. So on a macro level, the situational spot is not good for the Browns. And then there's the fact that Jeudy now has much more target competition than I thought he would, both from Cedric Tillman and from Harold Fandon. So a low scoring setup with a volatile position and then extra target competition on top of that. That just, to me, makes Jerry Jeudy so dangerous this week. So I have him ranked as a low end wide receiver 3, but man, the downside is like wide receiver 5.
I'm with Cedric Tillman. Basically, if you go back to Cedric Tillman's last 6-ish starts, dude's like wide receiver 2. Cedric Tillman is getting really interesting to me. And Jerry Jeudy, maybe somebody who's losing some of the confidence in his own coaching staff. Let's go to our next flex around and find out player. But first, there's this from Xfinity. Today's Chop podcast built entirely around possible disappointment, but not with Xfinity. Introducing the 5-year price guarantee from Xfinity. 1 internet price, 5 years guaranteed. Life is unpredictable, but the price of your internet should not be. Get a reliable price with a reliable connection. All in means all in. You get Wi-Fi equipment, unlimited data, all included. This whole episode about change, draft positions change, teams change, players come and go, rankings change, good matchups, bad matchups. But no matter what changes in 5 years, the price of your internet will stay the same. Learn more at Xfinity.com. Restrictions apply. New residential customers only. Taxes and fees extra and subject to change. All right. My next flex around and find out player. Staying with the Browns. Cleveland running back Dylan Sampson goes up against Baltimore. We learned a lot about Dylan Sampson. 20 opportunities in his first ever NFL start. That's huge. 12 rushes, 8 targets. But Thor and Freedman, do you want to make a guess, or maybe already saw, the average, the ADOT, the average distance of target for Dylan Sampson last week? You don't want to make any guesses at that?
I'm going to guess it's negative.
I'll go negative 1.6.
Negative 3.5 yards.
Wasn't even close.
No, okay. Wow, I love the 8 targets, but we're throwing 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage here. And then as a runner, there just wasn't a lot of meat on the bone here. Here's some week 1 metrics for Dylan Sampson. 24th in broken tackle rate, just 8%. 28th in yards per carry, just 2.4. Yuck. 22nd in yards after contact, just 2.2. So now you've got the Ravens. The Ravens offense just dropped 40 points on Buffalo. So I fear that this could be a track meet, and we're not going to get a lot of rushing opportunities from Cleveland. Ravens are the biggest favorite on the board, 10.5 point favorites. With Jerome Ford playing 86% of the long down and distance snaps and 100% of the 2-minute snaps last week. If this thing does turn into a shootout, maybe Ford's still in the mix more than people want. I can't really get excited about Dylan Sampson, even with the 20 opportunities last week.
Yep.
That's a lot of,
agree.
That's a lot of talking. Yeah. All right. Okay. Sometimes it's fine to just say, Charch, you're right. And then we can move on.
Charch, you're right.
All right, fantastic. Thor, let's see if you're right when you flex around and find out about Indianapolis wide receiver Michael Pittman coming off a really nice game. I think 8 catches, 80 yards, a touchdown, something in that ballpark. But now he hooks a much tougher matchup in Denver.
Oh gosh, he sure does. Charchian, I can bring people in behind the curtain here. Charchian, and this is Charchian. Get your peacock sounder ready. Charchian told me about a month ago. He's like surprise candidate for first overall pick is the Miami Dolphins. And we saw in week 1. Yeah, you might be right on that one, Mr. Charchian. The Dolphins are absolutely terrible. The Dolphins have the worst secondary in the NFL, and Pittman ripped them up. You also had a situation where Indianapolis's offense, you had made some strategic tweaks, moving to the veteran old hand in Daniel Jones from the super inconsistent accuracy averse Anthony Richardson. And Michael Pittman essentially was able to take advantage of a confluence of those factors to have a big week 1, like a turn back the clock to the USC days or early Indianapolis days for Michael Pittman. He's going to return to orbit and return to earth this week in a horrible matchup against Denver and Mr. Patrick Surtain. You go from one of the best matchups in 2025 fantasy football against the Dolphin secondary, if you're an NFL wide receiver, to the worst against Patrick Surtain. You can just ask Calvin Ridley about that. Calvin Ridley was the one who got the Patrick Surtain treatment last week. Calvin Ridley got targeted 1 time for 0 catches. Oh. Cam Ward, the rookie, wanted no part. I'm not throwing within your area code, right. Patrick Surtain. So, I mean, that's Michael Pittman, who is wide receiver 8 in week 1. I do not believe he is startable this week across from Patrick Surtain. I think the offensive strategy, you're going to have to tweak it a little bit more if you're Indianapolis, because all those targets you were funneling to Pittman, they got to go somewhere else. Michael Pittman, keep him on your bench this week.
It's a bold call for a reversal, but it all makes sense. Denver is a very, very tough matchup. You mentioned the Miami secondary. They're going to have to start Rasul Douglas, who was a street free agent 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
It's not going to get better from that Miami secondary as a side note here. All right, Freedman, let's go to your next and I think final flex around and find out player. And it's my guy. You don't know this because you and I don't have a long history. I was the guy banging the drum for Jonnu Smith back in the Tennessee days. And then I got all excited when the Patriots gave him that big deal. And then like 2 days later, they signed Hunter Henry to a big deal. And that broke my heart. Then, he eventually finds his way to Miami. He's great. I feel all vindicated for years, a pound on the table for Jonnu Smith. And now he's right back into a timeshare in Pittsburgh. And this one doesn't look very good.
Yeah, I was with you in liking him with Tennessee. I mean, I thought he was sort of like the heir to Delaney Walker's vacated throne, and he had the potential there, and it just never came to full fruition. And then last year was great, and then now he finds himself in this timeshare. But I will say there are some good things if you just sort of look at Jonnu Smith, the setup. Okay, for the Seahawks, who he's going against this week, safety Nick Emenwari is probably out with a high ankle sprain. And so given that the Steelers run so many 2 tight end sets, Emenwari probably would have been featured on defense. So maybe a potential better matchup than he otherwise would have had. And then you look at the box score last week, 6 targets, 5 receptions, and a touchdown. So all of that looks good for Jonnu Smith. But then if you look at the utilization report that we have at Fantasy Life, it's not positive for Jonnu. The utilization score last week was a 58. That was the tight end 17. He had just a 53% route rate. He had a literal 0 ADOT, which resulted in 15 receiving yards last week. Like he was not being targeted downfield at all. He had a 33% target rate, and that's good, but that's unsustainable. So what happens when he isn't targeted in the red zone or end zone? What happens when he has only 4 targets instead of 6? that means you're looking at a 3-catch, 12-yard performance. Like that will make you extremely vulnerable to the blade.
Very.
So like Smith is talented. He's the number 1 tight end for the Steelers, not Pat Freiermuth, but because they are both on the team, neither guy has a secure floor. And that makes both of them, and specifically I'm looking at Jonnu right now, that looks both of them very vulnerable in the Guillotine Leagues.
We don't like split backfield running backs, let alone split tight end usage. Ugh. And Jonnu's athletic enough to be used downfield, but that did not come to fruition for whatever reason in week 1. We'll continue to watch. I don't think Jonnu is going to be guillotine survivable because there's just too much downside for both him and Pat Freiermuth to be startable in any game, unfortunately. All right, our final flex around and find out player. Seattle wide receiver Cooper Kupp, same game, going up against Pittsburgh. Just 2 catches for 15 yards last week, so maybe this seems obvious. Maybe I should have done something a little higher degree of difficulty here. But I know people started Cooper Kupp. I looked at the data. People started Cooper Kupp last week. I was worried about Seattle's congestion in the slot with Jackson Smith-Njigba and Cooper Kupp, both guys who have been way more productive running from the slot than they've been running from the outside. And especially Kupp. And as it turned out in week 1, they mostly pushed Jackson Smith-Njigba to the outside, where he seemed to do just fine, by the way. And it looks like he's going to be a force all over the field. Kupp ran half his routes outside, which I didn't love. Those have not generally been effective spots for him to start his routes while he was with LA. And other troubling parts of Kupp's game include this. He dropped a pass. That's something Cooper Kupp never does. He did it only twice all last year. And we got one in week 1 here because of his age and because of the mileage. We've been worried about Kupp, and that all seemed bad in week 1. I can't tell you that it's going to get better in week 2 against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh traded to acquire Jalen Ramsey, and Jalen Ramsey in week 1 played the slot, something he had only done a little bit of his entire career. What happened to Jalen Ramsey's move to the slot for Pittsburgh? He gave up 1 catch for 6 yards and had 2 pass breakups. Jalen Ramsey is still a tough matchup, and I don't favor Cooper Kupp in this one. Guys, what do you think? Cooper Kupp against Pittsburgh, guillotine startable, or is this more of a flex around and find out?
I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, it's nasty. He has legit 0 catch downside. Yeah. Like that's well within the realm of possibilities.
I think it does. They're going to regret that contract, by the way, in Seattle.
Oh, yeah.
That was an expensive contract that they gave him. And I don't know all the structure, in terms of, how much of it's guaranteed, what the future cap implications are, but 3 more years for Cooper Kupp? I don't know. Yeah. Guys, this has been a ton of fun. Hopefully you will not flex around and find out. Hopefully you will at least heed some of the advice that we've given you here, or at least pause for thought on this. This is, these are concerning times. We'll have to be careful here. Flex around and find out. Brought to you by Xfinity. Introducing the 5-year price guarantee. One consistent internet price for the next 5 years guaranteed. Thor, great job today. Also, Matthew, thank you very much. Matt LaMarca, thank you for all of your technical direction today. Everybody will be back next week for more Chop, the Guillotine League podcast.